The Conjuring 2 is a horror movie that describes itself as being inspired by the real-life events of the Enfield Poltergeist haunting. Although a lot of the film was fictionalized to make an entertaining movie, it is impressive how hard they tried to make certain scenes look like the actual footage recorded in the 70s. The casting, set design and cinematography really do make certain scenes look like the real thing. Of course, in real life, there weren't crosses turning upside down, weird apparitions, and people being pinned to the ceiling, but this interesting mix of fact and fiction made me want to examine the true events that inspired the movie. This is the true story of the Enfield Poltergeist. It began in 1977, when 4 children reported to their mother, Peggy Hodgson, that they had heard strange shuffling sounds in their bedroom and saw objects moving about on their own. Of course, the mother did not believe these stories until one night. The children heard the shuffling sound again in their room. It was like heavy feet walking around on the floor. The mother came into the room because the children were screaming and crying, and she witnessed with her own eyes a chest of drawers sliding across the floor when nobody was near it. When she tried to push it back, it would not move. It was as if it was being held by an invisible force. This was when she knew that something was wrong and told the children to go downstairs. Frightened and unable to explain what was happening, Peggy Hodgson called the police, who conducted a thorough search and investigation of the property. The officers heard the banging, and one officer witnessed something unexplainable, an armchair moving of its own accord, which she described in this interview.
It came off the floor, or nearly a ½ inch I should say, and I saw it slide off to the right, about 3.5 to 4 feet before it came to rest. I checked to see whether or not it could possibly have slid along the floor. I placed a marble on the floor to see whether or not the marble would go in the same direction as the chair did, and it didn't roll at all. I checked for wires under the cushion of the chair, and I could find no explanation at all.
The officers concluded that whilst there was something highly unusual happening in the house, it was not criminal in nature, and so they couldn't do anything about it. Unable to provide a solution for the family, the Hodgsons were left alone in a house with an entity that was slowly getting more and more active. The activity mostly focused on the 2 daughters, Margaret and Janet. 11-year-old Janet was the main target for these attacks, but it was thought that the entity was strongest when the family was together as a group, as if it was feeding off their collective energies. In desperation, the mother contacted the papers, and as it was a slow news day, journalists from the Mirror and the Daily Mail turned up to report the story. Although skeptical at first, reporters left the house terrified by the strange goings-on. In an interview with the BBC, photographer Graham Morris tells about his experience of seeing objects fly about the room as if thrown by an invisible force.
We've been told that it all seemed to happen around the younger daughter, Janet. She was the epicenter of the whole thing, and was right the way through. And I thought, right, okay, well, give me 2 minutes to get ready. And I popped in next door and waited, and then when they came in one at a time, and then as Janet came through the door, just bang, just things took off. And
what do you mean?
Flew. Well, little bits and pieces really, but it didn't matter anything. It doesn't matter how small it was. It was the fact that something had just flown across the room.
You actually saw things?
Yes, we
flying across the room, Graham.
Yeah, we stood in that room. I got hit by a Lego brick, one of the kids' toys, just above my eye, which was in itself not much, but it was a fair bit of force. It left a mark there for a few days. And everyone that was stood there just saw these things with amazement. Just couldn't believe what was happening.
Suspecting a prank, he stood in one corner of the room so that he could keep a close eye on the family members.
Impossible that anybody was propelling them, anybody was throwing them.
Yes, yeah, impossible. I mean, I was looking around, I was watching the kids. Obviously, they were waking up by this stage. They were standing there. They were petrified. They were so frightened. They were standing either with their hands over their faces. They were standing with their fingers in their mouths. There were adults in the background, but they were just the same. I remember the Mirror reporter, who was the other side of the room. He was stood there with his hands in his pockets watching. No, I mean, I looked around to see as much as I could while I was working to see where these things were coming from, but no, I really don't believe that anyone was doing it.
Despite Graham Morris's best efforts, the flying objects were too small and moving too quickly to be photographed. In an effort to get more concrete evidence, reporters set up a time-lapse camera in the children's bedroom. This was a remotely activated camera that the photographer could operate from another room. If he heard any strange noises coming from the bedroom, he would activate the camera and it would take a number of pictures in quick succession. By this point, Peggy Hodgson was so terrified of the entity that she was making the whole family sleep in the same room. The activity was becoming increasingly violent, with heavy furniture being thrown across the room, girls being dragged out of bed, and unexplainable knocking sounds coming from the walls. On a number of occasions, the cameras captured some very disturbing images. They appeared to show the girls being thrown into the air, as if an entity was pulling them up and out of bed, throwing them across the room. The attacks on the girls were becoming more and more aggressive. At one point, the curtain from a window next to Janet's bed wrapped itself around her neck and began to strangle her. The family were then contacted by the Society for Psychical Research, who sent 2 paranormal investigators named Maurice Gross and Guy Lyon Playfair. The investigators informed the family that they were dealing with a poltergeist and set up equipment to try and capture more evidence. Maurice communicated with the knocking sounds. He would ask a question and it would knock once for no and twice for yes. He recorded these sessions with a tape recorder and got some very clear and intelligent responses.
Knock 1 for no and 2 for yes. Are you a male spirit? 1 for no and 2 for yes.
2.
That's 2. You are a male spirit. Did you used to live in this house? You did. Was it more than 50 years ago? Yes. Did you die in this house? Did you pass on? You did pass on in this house. Now why are you here? Are you unhappy? You're not unhappy. But why are you here? Is it because you want to give us a special message? No. You don't want to give us a special message. Are you having a game with me? Oh, right.
Oh, crumbs.
As I asked the question, are you having a game with me? It's through the cardboard box and the pillow right in my face. Well, thank you very much. That was a very good answer.
After a week of these communications, the haunting took on a sinister turn, and Janet started to produce a deep and guttural barking noise.
We got a doggy here.
Morris suspected that the girls were being possessed by the entity. He urged the poltergeist to try and say his name, and soon the barking noises started to form themselves into words.
I want you to call out my name, my complete name, Maurice Gross. See if you can do that. Very good. Let me hear you say my name again. Come on, let me hear you say my name. Come on, my name's Morris. Let me hear you say it. Morris.
Before long, Janet was regularly communicating with the investigators in a deep man's voice, The voice was bad-tempered and foul-mouthed, very different from Janet's own personality. Multiple voices started to come through, each one calling itself by a different name.
How many voices are there?
Dirty Dick, Andrew Garner, and Stuart Thurton.
Dirty Dick, Andrew Gardner, and Stuart
Thurton.
And what do you think these are? Are they people or are they just voices?
Could be spirits, I don't know.
I believe it's a
Ghosts
form of a spirit speaking for us somehow.
It is unclear whether or not there really were multiple spirits in the property. It could well have been a single entity, making different voices and giving various names to trick and confuse the family. One voice in particular came through more strongly than the others, and eventually it gave its name as Bill Wilkins. Naturally, people were skeptical of these voices, as people thought the girls had trained their vocal cords to fake the noises. A special microphone placed against Janet's throat showed that she was not using her vocal cords, but a part of the larynx called the false vocal fold to make the sound. Although it is possible for a person to use the false vocal fold to disguise their voice, most people can only speak this way for a few minutes before permanently damaging their vocal cords. Janet Hodgson was talking in this voice for up to 3 hours at a time with no discomfort, a feat which the investigators concluded was impossible. As an experiment, Morris filled Janet's mouth with water, then placed tape over her mouth. The voice of Bill Wilkins came through loud and clear. When the voice had stopped talking, the tape was removed and Janet spat out a mouthful of water. The most chilling recording was made one night when Morris was attempting to get more information from the voice. He asked Bill Wilkins how he had died, and he got this response.
2 days before I died, I went blind. Then I had an hemorrhage, and I fell asleep, and I died in a chair in the corner downstairs.
At the time of recording, neither the family nor the investigators knew what to make of these claims. It was only when the BBC aired a documentary about the haunting and played this recording that a man named Terry Wilkins contacted the family to tell them that his father, Bill, had lived and died in the house now owned by the Hodgsons. Bill Wilkins had been found dead in an armchair in the corner of the room. He fell asleep after suffering a hemorrhage, exactly as the voice had said. Whether or not this was really the spirit of Bill Wilkins is not certain. The fact that it first vocalized with animal noises suggests that this was actually a demonic entity. It is quite common for demons to impersonate the spirits of real people in order to gain people's confidence. The more people communicated with the poltergeist, the stronger it seemed to get. It seemed to feed off their attention. Soon it was becoming extremely dangerous. Janet would regularly go into a trance-like state where she would become very violent and harm herself and others. And this got so bad that doctors would have to inject her with tranquilizers every day. Janet was taken into psychiatric care and tested by professionals for any kind of mental problems, but was given a clean bill of health. On 2 separate occasions, people walking past the house witnessed Janet levitating in the upstairs bedroom window. On one of these occasions, she was thrown so violently against the glass that the witness was terrified that she would break through it. The fireplace in the children's bedroom was mysteriously wrenched from the wall and thrown across the room. This cast iron piece of equipment is far too heavy for a grown man to lift on his own, let alone a child. The entity was becoming frighteningly powerful. The haunting continued for just under 2 years. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, it was gone. All that was left was hours of audio tapes, hundreds of photographs, and a lifetime of nightmares. The evidence has been endlessly debated and analysed. Some people still insist that the whole thing was one elaborate prank played by mischievous children looking for attention. Were they really able to fool journalists, police and paranormal investigators for nearly 2 years. The Conjuring 2 is just the latest in a long line of horror movies and TV shows inspired by the Enfield haunting. My personal favourite is a show made by the BBC in 1992 called Ghost Watch. This mockumentary was made a full 10 years before Most Haunted was aired, but it predicts modern ghost hunting TV shows with amazing accuracy. It starts out as a corny TV show. Skeptical and energetic presenters are making jokes, but slowly it becomes more and more sinister and frightening. The show uses subliminal and psychological tricks to mess with the audience. When it first aired, it was so believable that it caused a minor panic similar to the War of the Worlds incident. I remember going to school the day after it was aired, and my teacher had to stand in front of the class and tell everybody to calm down because the show was not real. All the kids in the class were so scared by it. It was a piece of horror that was way ahead of its time, and its Enfield Poltergeist inspirations are very clear. If you ever get a chance to watch it, I highly recommend it. So what do you think about the Enfield case? Is this really evidence of poltergeist activity, or merely an elaborate hoax? Leave a comment to let me know what you think. If you want to support more content like this, please check out my Patreon page, link is in the description. Thank you for watching this video. Until next time, goodbye.